Today we have Cam Juárez in the studio with us. Cam is a Tucson Unified School District board member and has been one for about a year and a half, and is here to talk to us about some of the things that have happened during his tenure and recently at a recent board meeting, some very important information that has come up. So welcome, Cam. Thanks for coming by.
Thanks for having me.
So you have been on the board for a year and a couple months now, 3 or 4 months. You're new to this. Tell me what has been some of your experiences, the things that have been the good things that happened, the difficult, maybe some things you didn't expect.
Sure. Well, I mean, like with everything, there's a learning curve, and I think this district, in its long history, has had its share of learning curves, and it's been interesting to learn not only the history of the district from the inside, but also how we interact as board members. That's been probably one of the most interesting things that I've had to deal with. Coming into this district, we had to look at balancing the budget, a $17 million deficit as a result of budget shortfall, and I think they called it a budgetary cliff at one point. So that was probably one of the more challenging things that I've had in my tenure. The next thing we had to deal with that really had some very surprising and positive results was Dr. Petticone's leaving the district and us finding a new superintendent. I would say that primarily the most important piece of that is that the end result was bringing on Dr. Sanchez and his team. There's been a lot of shakeup since he came on board in terms of looking at who we're bringing into the district to help us drive the district in a different direction, in a positive trajectory, as it's been referred to many times. But really, from that was also this new idea of not only investing in our communities by opening up the doors to the district and allowing different organizations, jurisdictions to come in and partner with us. It was also about opening the doors to allowing the public to be part of the conversation.
Well, give us some examples of this. I know Dr. Sanchez really wants to make TUSD more a part of the community as opposed to a place where the kids come into school and then go home. Sure. So what are some, not just general, but some specifics about some of the things that he has either accomplished already or things that he's working on?
One very important piece to this is having a plan. Because we can't just go willy-nilly trying to solve issues with public education without necessarily having a plan. And so the strategic planning session, which was in the paper quite a bit, and you know, in this town we really have one major newspaper, and then of course we have, you know, other papers like the Weekly and those sorts of things which you're familiar with. But really, it was having a plan, a 5-year plan that came out of that is coming, I should say, out of that strategic planning session. We were present, both you and I. My wife was there as well. She's part of the new group of people that are meeting over the next few Saturdays to really kind of flesh out that plan. But that plan really comes at an intersection with the enormous brain that's inside of Dr. Sanchez. And you know, the level of energy that the man has, combined with a very recognizable intellect, I think is something that he does well to mix up with how he interacts with people in the district, but also in the public.
I know some people question here, he's a young man, he's under 40. This is the first district he's ever been a superintendent of. Huge district, the largest one, it's still the largest one in the state, right? Sure. And some people question, does he really have what it takes with his youth and inexperience to run something this large? And whenever there's a little hiccup, a little minor bump, they say, oh, there goes, he's showing his inexperience. Do you think that he has what we need?
Absolutely. You know, he's laid out a commitment by putting forward this strategic plan, and not just putting forward the session, but actually getting some muscle behind it. He's put together a pretty amazing team, and really the testament, probably the most tangible testament to that is that other district staff are jumping from their districts to come work for TUSD. I mean, it's not only it's not only recognizable or tangible, but it's something that we can see. Each one of the superintendents that or deputy superintendents, I should say, and directors that he's put in place bring to the table an enormous amount of experience and professionalism, but also a lot of them have children of their own and children that they've brought to TUSD.
Yeah, I know that there has been a lot of change, and I know the man is a terrific communicator, and I know he's good working both with professionals and with the community. He has a wonderful community touch. So at the last board meeting, just recently as we're talking here, there may be another board meeting as you're seeing this on television, there was an audit that was brought up, the $200,000 that the district spent for an audit, and I know he was talking about this at the beginning of his tenure. He was saying, don't expect me to make changes yet. I don't want to just blindly go out and make changes. I want to wait for this audit to come. So the audit finally came. I think you told me that this was the first time you saw it Tuesday night at the meeting. And I know it purely from the article that I read in the Star. I haven't gotten any more knowledge about it. So tell us a bit about what this revealed and what you think that's going to indicate about the direction for the district.
Well, Mr. Poston, who presented, who was the lead auditor on this curriculum audit, talked a lot about it, a lot of different details. But as I said at the board meeting, and I remain committed to this statement, this was a long, hard look in the mirror. We recognize that TUSD is doing well. I mean, we were in the top 10 rankings with the top high schools in the nation in the USM Weekly reports, and that's great. But the problem is that we have close to 100 sites that we have to be great in. Some of those are facilities, of course, but most of them are elementary, middle, pre-K-8s, high schools, even some alternative programs, and we have to be great at every one of those sites.
Well, according to the news report anyway, Sanchez referred to some of the stuff in the audit as brutal. That was the term he used. And now I have to say that it's not really brutal on his watch. It's talking about the history of the district.
Absolutely.
This wasn't a hit on him because this is what he was looking at. But what did he mean when he said that there were some brutal assessments in this audit?
There's definitely some evidence within the audit itself, and what we saw that the audit will become available to the public probably over the weekend, and it'll be on the TUSD website for public consumption. But within it, the presentation, and I highly advise anyone who wants to understand that presentation to look on our website and look at the video of that. But within that presentation, there was some acknowledgement that when we look at race and ethnicity, but we also look at SES, or socioeconomic status, we are not doing the best possible job that we can do. And we all think that TUSD is doing great as compared to years past, and that's great. But how do we get us over that hump? Because we all know we're moving in that direction. But it was important for the board, it was important for the superintendent, it was important for the district to know where we were. We talk a lot about high stakes testing, standardized testing. I remember when we used to take those tests and the results would help the teacher rearrange the curriculum in such a way that she could help her students or his students, whereas these standardized tests really are more punitive now. So looking at that perspective, this audit was put in place so that we could take that long, hard look in the mirror and then understand where we needed to focus.
So some of the things it said, these do sound brutal, but I'm going to have to say that as a former teacher, I taught 30 years, and I know the things that go on in the schools and in school districts. This is not so much brutal as honest about what happens, and it's not exclusive to TUSD. These are the kinds of things you need to tweak. But it said that the curriculum is not well aligned with the state assessments as they are now, that the students aren't being taught to master concepts as much as they should, that they're learning to cover the material as opposed to dealing with a conceptual level, that classroom expectations aren't as high or as rigorous as they should be, and finally, that the curriculum guides aren't adequate. So this is a large look at the kinds of things that you could say about virtually any district, and certainly a district like Tucson that's been under a lot of scrutiny. Those things could be tightened up. What are some of the ways that the district is going to approach?
Well, it was surprising to me that this audit, we were under the impression would advise us to cut staff, specifically central staff. And what the audit was revealing was that we were missing a lot of crucial positions. That not only were we missing a lot of crucial positions, but some of the job duties or the responsibilities attached to different positions were not adequate. You talked a lot about not being aligned with standards. Well, in the state of Arizona, where our state legislature refuses to adequately fund public education, we have elected officials in that body that are arguing that we don't need standards, that we especially don't need federal standards. So what I would argue, and what a lot of the board members and the superintendent would argue, is that the standards should be the floor, not the ceiling for what we're doing. And if we do that effectively, and we take into consideration the unitary status plan and our DSEG order, we have to do it in such a way that we're not going to be focusing specifically on Latinos and African Americans, but on all of our students. And we should be doing that in such a way where we're making national headlines in performance, and not performance just on standardized tests, but on graduation rates and across the demographic board. But also, how do we look at that again in a tangible form? And that again goes back to graduation rates.
Well, you mentioned the question of whether we're administratively top-heavy, or maybe we need more people in certain administrative positions. Well, before we began taping, you started telling me something that I had heard a little bit about, but you told me a lot more about it. And please tell people about this 27-to-1 concept and the concept of trying to get more people in the schools, because I think that really, to me, sounds like a very positive step forward.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, in the first week of May, we celebrate Teacher Appreciation Week. And also Teacher Appreciation Day on that Tuesday of that week. And it's so important to try to understand that these teachers are ground troops. They're really the ones that are right there in the trenches with our kids. And really it's an issue of providing more with less. Well, I think one of the things that Dr. Sanchez talked about almost immediately into his tenure was the fact that we had classrooms with 34 students per teacher. And not only were we removing teaching assistants and those kinds of positions that were supposedly non-instructional positions, but are positions that are important nonetheless. These teachers were, again, almost like when you go to the grocery store and you buy that cereal box that you've been familiar with all your life, and the box is smaller, and it almost fits in your back pocket, and you're like, this is a box of cereal? Well, these teachers, for a long time, teachers have been left to their own devices and actually have, as you know, bought some of those supplies on their own, out of their own pocket. Well, the funding, the public education funding has gotten smaller, and we're asking more and more of them through these assessments. So what Dr. Sanchez and what the board has really been looking at is, how do we reduce the number of students that teacher has to spend one-on-one time with? Because if all the studies that I've read and I looked at, and I'm sure all the studies you're familiar with, the more time a teacher spends with that student, they can adjust the curriculum, the standard, the bottom of the barrel curriculum. They can adjust the curriculum to teach that student.
And ideally, you'd like to have a 20-to-1 ratio or 17-to-1 ratio in the K through 3 area. Absolutely. Where the kids really need that first push. Absolutely. But obviously, with the kind of funding we have in the state, that's not possible, right? Sure. So what's he doing in terms of this 27-to-1 number that we were hearing?
They've spent hours upon hours looking at a very antiquated system where we're looking at our budget. I mean, we've been talking about getting a new system, and that's going to cost some money. But they've been looking at this very antiquated system that really has given us these spreadsheets that cover an entire floor in a room this large probably. And they're trying to find where they're going to move the money. This is something that I ran on. I said we're going to have not only a more accessible budget, but a transparent one. Because we've always had a kind of a transparent one, and that's been difficult to understand because of the accessibility.
We're running a little bit low on
Sure.
time here, so I want to know, tell me some money that's going to be moved.
Right now, we have a lot of staff that's at the central office. Those staff members are going to be moved out into the individual sites all over. About 140 positions are going to be moved out into the individual sites, as opposed to having them at central. Some of that money, in terms of that, is still being moved around a little bit. That's been in a conversation with our teachers union. That's been in a conversation with administrators at the individual sites. So specifically where that money is coming from, I can't really give you all that level of detail, because that would be the administration that would understand that better than myself. But what I can tell you is that that's been central to some of the policies we've been approving, and that is to try to reduce some of those expenditures. We've also looked at solar to try to reduce our utility costs so that we can spend more money on students as opposed to operating the site.
We have only been able to scratch the surface. Obviously, we can go on for a long time. I just want to make the comment that as a teacher, I know that the school district isn't you, and it's not Sanchez, and it's not the stuff that makes the news about the budgets. It's the kids in the classrooms where things are happening, and the teachers are working their tails off, as well as the administrators, of course. And that's what it's all about, and what we've got to focus on. And I know you spend a great deal of time in classrooms and really focus on the children. I know you have a son yourself who is of that age, so you have a great love for kids of that nature. That's right. So I appreciate you coming in, and I wish you the best and hope to see great things from you and the board and the district.
Thank you, Dave. I appreciate it. And I thank all the folks that are willing to invest in public education, because that's really the biggest indicator of economic development out there. And that's what we need for this community and this country.